Welcome to episode 27 of WooWoo for the Skeptic. I'm Kim Polinder, your host and curiosity advocate for the world of metaphysics. So, what's your sign? And your moon sign? And your rising sign? And what makes certain signs compatible with other signs? Well, if you've ever been curious about astrology beyond your sun sign, then today's interview will shed some light on other layers of yourself that were supposedly determined by the planets. And speaking of planets, why is Mercury Retrograde such a big deal? Many of your questions about astrology are answered in today's episode. My guest today is astrology extraordinaire Nadiya Shah. Nadiya is an internationally syndicated astrologer, author, television, and internet personality, and is one of the few people in the world to hold an MA in the cultural study of cosmology and divination. Nadiya's latest book, Astrology Realized, introduces the foundational knowledge of astrology. Nadiya also has multiple media platforms for which she is well known, including Synchronicity WebTV and astrofabulous.com. Nadiya was recently named one of the top 12 astrologers on the planet by French Vanity Fair, who crowned her a pioneer in video astrology, and her weekly and monthly astrology videos are something that I always look forward to. Nadiya, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you so much, Kim. I'm truly grateful for this moment. Thank you for seeing me as some part of your creative vision. Thank you. And sharing me with your audience as well.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And I know you're just getting over a little bronchitis and voice stuff. So we'll get through this.
Absolutely.
So tell the listener how you took an interest in astrology.
Well, I always think of astrology as something that found me at a very young age. It was something that I just had an inclination for. There's a little bit of a story to it. You know, I come from a family of people in my, going way back and not so way back, but people who really enjoyed the esoteric arts and different mystical practices. So there was already a supportive atmosphere in place. And, I remember I was 14 years old and there was a big fair that happens in Toronto every year. And I went there, and the way that they used to do it is they had a bunch of tables set up, and all these young people would come for this 3-week fair to try and get a job. And you'd interview with these different tables, and whoever took you, and you worked for 3 weeks. And the table that ended up taking me was a palm reading table. So they gave me a sheet of paper with a bunch of hands on it and explaining what the different lines are. They said, learn this, come back tomorrow. When I came back, it was, 3 weeks of a lot of affirmation, people telling me that I was good at what I was doing. It was very affirmative, and it was a very supportive atmosphere. And it was after that my family started giving me astrology books and encouraging me to learn this. And it just kind of fell into place and went forward from there.
Do you know much about the history of astrology, like how long it's been around? I'm sure it's been a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. The earliest recorded documents that we have of humanity include a documentation of the sky. And some of the earliest understandings that we had of the sky is that there was something divine and that there was something symbolic playing out. And, as human beings, as our understanding, our philosophy got more sophisticated, we can see how historically people start contemplating and considering how what is happening in the sky is speaking to them in their own lives as well, and in the cultural lives of their people and society as well. So astrology does go way back. I do believe I see it. We know that astrology is part of every single culture, past and present. And astrology is something that is a living practice. It responds to whatever culture it's in, and it helps and becomes whatever it is that particular culture needs it to be.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me that depending on what's going on with the planets and the energy and let's just say the universe, that it will affect people in different ways depending on when they were born. Is that correct?
I like to think that the planets are not so much affecting us, but they are a mirror for us. They're one more way that we can consider our lives. They're symbolic in a removed way that we can contemplate what is happening for us right now and what has happened for us and what may happen for us. It allows us a greater level of awareness. And so for me, and it's, again, astrologers have been saying this going back many, many centuries, the sky is a mirror. It is a mirror. You can choose to use it or not. You can learn from anything in your environment or not. But, as you said, like when you're born and how you react to it, that has a lot to do with your own level of awareness. So the awareness that you bring to your life, to your environment, is going to be reflected in how you understand and how aware it is that you desire to be of the sky.
I really like that analogy. I haven't heard the mirror description before, and I like that because previously I had thought, well, the energy is such and such right now, and so, that's the way it is for everyone. It can affect me or not. I can choose to utilize it or not, but to make it more personalized, like a mirror for us specifically, makes it a lot more useful.
I like to think that every moment has a certain spirit, if you will. It has an energy, it has an inclination, it has a momentum. And so we can think about the sky representing that very momentum. Some spirit, some momentum may last an extended period of time. Some may only be there for the day. But yes, like when you talk about, the energy and how people may be feeling, this can be a symbolic consideration of that very spirit of the moment.
Yeah, now I know that astrology is very complex and you can get very, very detailed. I think everybody who's listening knows their sun sign. So for someone who's just maybe new to astrology or doesn't know that much about it, like what are some of the key elements to a person's chart, let's say?
Sure. So you have to consider one of the sort of unspoken philosophical assertions of astrology is that it represents a connection to everyone, to everything. It represents your place in the universe, in the larger world, in your environment as well. And so when we look at the fact that the sky, just like life and everybody's life, is vast, right? There's lots of different desires that may be playing out, even within one particular person. There might be lots of desires. Some work really well together. Some conflict. Lots of different motivations may be playing out there as well. Well, it's like that as well when you look at the sky. You've got lots of different celestial bodies, if you will, out there, and you are connected to them all. There is something there that is able to speak to you in your heart and in your own spirit. And so to me, I think of that very understanding. The sky is complex. There's lots of planets out there. They're all a part of you. Lots of stars out there. They're all a part of you. And ultimately, it is helpful to consider, to contemplate how all these different parts of us ultimately are trying to work together to move us in a direction that hopefully is more conscious and hopefully is happier as well.
So just to get into some of the basics of astrology, there's the sun sign, and that's more your personality.
Sure. So I can go through the planets. Absolutely. The planets are main symbols within a chart, and they represent really core parts of you, what Carl Jung called archetypal parts of you. And they represent a core energy that all of us have. So for example, like you mentioned, the sun represents who it is that you grow into. Right? It's your own identity. It's who you know yourself to be when you shine brightest. It's where you find your center and your core, and you find things within yourself that you can feel good about, that make you feel confident. And we all have that desire. We all have that need. We go about it in different ways. We express it in different ways, but that is what the sun sign would represent. We have the moon sign. Where was the moon? What sign was it in? How is it communicating with other planets in your chart? The moon represents what it is that makes you feel comfortable. It represents where and how you go about feeling at home in the world, and also your home as well. What does your own home look like for you? What's going to feel like home for you? So you want to look at the energy of the moon. I think the moon in some systems of astrology is more important than the sun, because I think that you can have all kinds of success, all kinds of motivation and things happening. But if you don't have that sense of equilibrium, that sense of being at peace with yourself, that sense of having what you truly need to feel emotionally well, then a lot of the other stuff is not as important. So I think the moon is incredibly important when you look at a chart. You want to honor the sign of the moon, and that's going to be based on your exact time of birth. And of course, we could go on with these different archetypal parts of yourself, like Venus, which is love, how you allow love in; Mars, how you go for what you want, what you're attracted to; Mercury, how you learn, how you process thoughts, how you communicate, and so on.
Yeah, I didn't know that there were planets. Well, I guess I did, but I didn't put much emphasis on it. The planets associated with each sign. Like, for example, so I'm Aquarius and then my moon is in Leo. So I've always heard that moon is more related to your emotional self.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Mm-hmm.
And then the rising sign is more how you present yourself to others.
The rising sign is it's right on the eastern horizon at the moment of your first breath. So when you look at the chart, it is representing, you are in the middle of the chart, and it is representing that first breath when spirit, when energy entered your body and it animated your body. And when we look at the chart, it is that eastern horizon, that point in the east. If someone were to go outside when you were born and look all the way at the east, what they would see is your rising sign, what's called your rising sign or your ascendant. And depending on the system of astrology, it can mean different things. It represents, yes, sort of the persona or the mask you wear when you are walking into new situations. How you sort of step into them and feel them out. It could be the first impression that people make. One thing that we can say about the ascendant is that it represents something about how early on in your life you understood that if you were going to navigate this world, how it is that you had to present yourself to others. But it's also, considered the gateway into the chart, and it represents also what it is that matters to you most, what matters to you first. What part of you, what energy do you need to honor and know is in place so that you can go out there and address all these other areas of life? So the ascendant is without a doubt very important, and it is based on exact time of birth.
Okay, yeah. And I've had friends, I'll just say dabbled in astrology where I know very high level basic stuff. And so friends have said to me in the past when we've talked about it that, oh yeah, I'm, let's just say Cancer, but I'm not a typical Cancer. And so that's where trying to explain how complex a chart can be, where you have other signs that figure into it, like maybe your moon sign or your ascendant sign would play into it. Is that right?
Exactly. We have many different parts of us. That Cancer energy that you share with, people born within a 30-day space of time, that is a part of you. It is where it is ultimately you're going to find your light, if you will, among other things. But yes, if you are Cancer, what the moon is doing, the moon is the ruling planet of Cancer. The moon becomes that much more important. So the moon is going to be a very important symbol in general, but especially for Cancer would be. And you have to look also at what do you need? What's your default comfort zone? That's what the moon is. And I think that's a big part of the disconnect that some people feel, is that they're expecting the sun to represent that default comfort zone for them when that is a different symbol in the chart.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would explain a lot. And then for Aquarius, what is the ruling planet then for that sign?
Sure. So as a fellow Aquarian, as you
Oh,
are, yes. So we can break it down. Let's go through the signs for your readers out there in terms of just the ruling planets. So the reason that ruling planets matter is that it's like your representative in the sky. And so when your ruling planet is having particular conversations, it's important to pay attention to that because it is particularly an important symbol for you as it is speaking to different parts of you that are going to be awakened, if you will, and different energies, different spirits that are going to mean more to you than they may others. So that represents something important for you in the sky. So let's go through the signs. For Aries, Mars is the planet, Taurus, Venus, Gemini, Mercury, and Cancer, the moon, Leo, Sun. For Virgos, it's also Mercury. And for Libras, it's Venus. For the Scorpios, it's Mars and Pluto, what we call the modern ruler. In modern astrology, we take the latest modern planets into consideration, the ones discovered over the course of the last 250 years or so. So it's Mars and Pluto. For Sagittarians, it is Jupiter. For Capricorns, it's Saturn. For Aquarius, it's Saturn and Uranus. And for Pisces, it's Jupiter and Neptune. So these are planets in particular that you do want to pay attention to. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about astrology, start there. Start considering how it is that this particular planet is speaking to some core archetype that is going to be important for you over the course of your life. It's going to be an archetype that you're going to be learning about yourself through in a particularly strongly symbolic way.
okay. And then can we talk a little bit about the different types of signs? Like, for example, there's the water signs. And what are those?
Sure, yeah. And so the different signs have elements. So this is, very much an astrology lesson. It's so much fun for me to talk about this stuff. So essentially the signs, at least in Western astrology in particular, the signs are connected to the seasons and they're connected to the earth, to the elements. They're connected to the point in time that they are in a particular season. So our perception of the sky and our perception of the time it is of the year, for example, particularly in Western astrology, is going to be that much more important. So when we look at the different elements, right? Again, because it's as above, so below. As we are understanding the sky, we understand more about our earthly experience. So every sign, how do I put it simply? Every sign has an element, and there are 4 elements in total. Each element will get 3 signs. I'll go through them in a moment, but each element will get 3 signs. But then what we also have that distinguishes them is what we call the modality. And the modality represents where that sign is in relation to a particular point in time in a season. So modality will either be cardinal, which starts a season. It'll be mutable. It'll be fixed, which will be in the middle, holding strong within a season, or it'll be mutable, which is gearing up to change seasons. So a sign can share an element with another sign, but it can't be both. It can't be the modality and element is the same with different signs. You only have one combination, if you will, and you come up with the 12 signs of the zodiac. So I can go through the astrological chart. I'll go through the signs very quickly and explain them a little bit. Yeah, so Aries starts the astrological year. This is cardinal. It begins spring. So it starts spring. And it is fire. Next, we have Taurus, which is earth. And this is a fixed sign because it holds in the middle. So let me explain a little bit before I continue on that with the elements. The elements are also symbolic of sort of a most immediate energy that's going to be more important. You know, what of four energies is going to be more emphasized for this person? So the fire signs represent passion, right? The fire for life. The earth signs represent practicality. They represent sort of building a solid foundation. The air signs represent mind and intellect. And then we have the water signs, which represent intuition and emotion. So, for example, Aries, fire, that's cardinal. So this is about passion that begins things. So when you start to understand the different modalities and the different elements, it becomes easy to start to make those connections. And that's ultimately what we're doing. We're starting at a base and then building that knowledge. So for the Taurus, fixed sign in the middle of the season, it's also earth. So it has to do with building something steady, being focused on it, right? These tend to be some characteristics or some ways to explain that Taurus energy. Gemini, mutable. It's finishing a season and it's air. So this is about thoughts that are changing, that can be changeable, that can move very quickly as well. And then we start a new season, which is summer, and that's Cancer, which is water. And so at the start of summer, what tends to happen, we're like just very much in touch with ourselves and our desires. And, the light is very strong on the earth. So we're feeling very much more enlightened. And there tends to be more of a connection to self, to emotion, to family, which is part of what the water cardinal represents. Then we have fixed fire. So that's Leo. And that represents, if you think about it, in the middle of summer, most people are kind of laying back, right? It tends to be sort of a leisurely, confident kind of energy. It has the passion, but it's holding it steady. We've got Virgo, which is mutable earth. And that has to do with constantly learning, constantly developing for some practical end. So there is a changeability there, but there's also a sense that this is part of what is going to allow you to build something that you can be proud of. Next, we have cardinal air, which is Libra. So that is beginning intellect of thoughts. It can feel very much like a new understanding is part of what that represents, but it is also a sign that has to do with finding the right balance of idea and thought. So it begins that process. Then we have Scorpio, which is fixed water. So Scorpios, famously have some very strong emotional energy, very potent emotional energy there. And so they are kind of holding that season as it's starting to get colder, right? In certain parts of the world, it's starting to get colder. And so this is where they're really like holding that emotion and tapping into that determination to make the coming cycle particularly strong. So I think about the fact that, it's after fall. It's in the middle of fall. This is when it starts getting colder. So you're thinking about, making sure you have enough food to last through the winter. So it has to do with that sense of being able to understand what has consequences, what actions right now have those deeper consequences, and connecting to that understanding emotionally. Then we have mutable fire, which is Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is an energy that is very much about self-trust, but it's also exploring, right? That changeability is there. So these are people who need to explore. If they are not in some way exploring ideas or places, if they're not in some way feeling like they are moving towards a different understanding and having that stimulation, that energy can start to feel very stagnant. It's not a very happy Sagittarius who doesn't have new experiences coming into their life or something that they can look forward to. Then we have cardinal earth, which is Capricorn. And that is about, you think about this, it's the start of winter, really. So this is really the fruits of the labor come in now. Like really this is what did you do all year and how now can you say that it mattered? Do you have enough food, right? That's one way to understand it. But also it's a symbolic process as well. Like, what did you earn? And now what legacy have you created? That's where we tend to be. It's also the beginning of, the darkest time of the year, the coldest time of the year. And so this gives us that opportunity to reflect and to go within and to check in with ourselves and make sure that we have accomplished the things that we feel good about. And then we have Aquarius, which is fixed air. And that, Aquarius is a sign. It does represent a lot of, the new, the next, the changeability, that modern understanding of Uranus. But it's a fixed sign. And so, Aquarians can be very focused, and they, also can be very committed to whatever their particular mode of thinking or ideas are. And that can actually be good because it allows them to develop them so that it ends up counting for something, so that it ends up manifesting into something that they can feel good about. And then we have Pisces, which is mutable water, the last of the zodiac signs. And this is where, the emotions can be very sensitive. They're very changeable. And there's a very strong sort of almost sponge-like connection to their environment and to others here, as, they're gearing up for this. That energy has to do a lot more with, understanding what you really feel, knowing that new beginnings are very much on the horizon.
Yeah, that's so interesting about the seasons, because I never knew about that aspect. I heard the words, like cardinal thrown around, but I never knew what it meant. So, I've always loved personality tests, and I think astrology, like just the brief summary that you just gave, can be so enlightening as to understanding a friend, understanding yourself with Aries. Since they're a cardinal sign, would that translate to them having energy supportive of starting things for them and for others?
For sure. Like it tends to represent someone very in touch with their most immediate impulses and passions and needing to sort of connect with and come forward from that particular place of connection.
Is it fair to say that they would be more challenged in finishing things or sustaining that energy?
It can be, yes. It's, it's said, I think about how when you are beginning a thing, can you hold it, right? That can be a little bit tricky because when you do something, when you start something, there's only going to be a certain period of time where it is, exciting and new and passionate and it starts to feel like there's a lot of fresh energy to it. Eventually, you are going to have to get to a place where it becomes a little bit routine. It needs more structure so that it can actually come to fruition in a bigger way. And that can be, if you, make that connection just like you did beautifully, that can be part of the learning opportunity, if you will, for the Aries out there.
Yeah. Learning opportunities for everyone, for every sign, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And then I just wanted to briefly mention the cusp aspect. Now, there are dates of the month that define which sun sign you are, or, maybe what your moon sign is. But can you explain maybe the aspect of a cusp and why that would be important?
Sure. So if you are born like around a time when the signs are changing, it's important to, if you can, try and get a birth chart to figure out exactly what sign you are. So I'll give you, for example, like I said, there's a moment, right, when the season begins. There's a spring equinox moment. And that start, that beginning, has an exact time. So the sun will either be at the very, very end of the sign of Pisces or at the very beginning of the sign of Aries. It won't be in both. And so it tends to be important to find out exactly which sign that sun is in. However, Mercury and Venus are never far from the sun. They're never more than 2 signs away from the sun. So it is possible that your sun is at the very beginning of one sign, but your Venus and your Mercury is in the sign before that. And because of that, you connect with that energy of the sign just before especially in early life, because the sun represents what you grow into, where you come to understand. So especially in early life, it might feel like your default is a little bit more the other sign, but you're always either one or the other. And I remember having this conversation with somebody, and he asked several times. He's like, "Are you sure? Like, but can't you be like a little both?" And I'm like, no, you're one or the other. Like, you're either at the very, very last minute, last second of one sign, or at the very, very beginning of the next. You're not ever going to have one foot in one sign and one in the other. But what you can have is different parts of you operating in these different signs.
Would you ever recommend that people who are near that cusp of the changeover, that they keep track of horoscopes for each sign, or should they just really commit to their sun sign?
Well, look, I think that it depends, right? Like when you're looking at things like sun sign astrology, horoscopes, they can speak to different parts of you. I remember putting a video about this up. Somebody had asked, like, can I watch a video for my Venus sign? They asked. And I was like, of course you can. Like, you are looking at what that core part of you, how that part is interacting with the world, right? With the other celestial bodies out there. So if you are looking at, what do you need in love right now? Then you can look at, okay, what does the sky say in terms of how that part of me that allows love in, how that part of me right now is being awakened or inspired or stimulated, what learning could be coming up for that part of me. So you can, but it is important to keep in mind that you're working with a certain archetype, you're working with a certain part of yourself. But what I would say is, what's really important is that it resonates with you. If it resonates with you, that's great. That is the omen you need. If it's something that helps you to connect with yourself, to have more awareness, to create greater happiness, then I'm all for that. And so if you're at a time in your life where that 0-degree sun isn't really resonating, or you could be at a time in your life where you're really honoring your moon and you're resonating strongly with your moon, and those are the signs that you want to watch, it's all good.
When you talk about things like if you look up what the moon sign is and how that affects you, and then decide how those energies, if you want to know how those energies are playing out in your life, like if moon is more related to emotions, looking up the horoscope for a moon sign would then give you more insight into how you deal with love or feelings.
It would have to do with how you deal with feelings, what you feel, what you need to feel comfortable with yourself. But also, yeah, like particularly if you think about committed relationships, a big part of committed relationships is feeling at home with this person, feeling comfortable with this person. And that's why the moon is very important where it comes to love. For just, pleasure and dating and flirting, those are other symbols in the chart, but the moon can be very important in the context of love. And so, yes, the more that you know that part of you is being honored, like I do think when we look at, relationships in astrology, the moon is like probably the first thing I'm looking at. How is this relationship honoring the moon? Because you can have everything else going really good, but if the moon is not, it becomes very difficult to live with this person. You could think they're amazing. You could love them. You could feel that they love you. They bless your life in a million ways. But if you can't really feel comfortable with them, if you can't really make a home with them, then that is, that's an important part of a relationship. And that part will need to be reconciled in some way. So yes, the moon, like I said, some systems of astrology in cultures where they're much more about family oriented, like in the West, we are very, like the individual is the nucleus of the culture in the Western world. So it is the individual, for better or worse. It is the individual who sort of is at the center of the universe, if you will, right? To put it in another language, is the center of culture. But there are a lot of cultures out there where it's family that is the center of the universe, that is the nucleus of the culture. Everything revolves around family. In those particular cultures, the moon is a more important symbol in the astrology chart than would be the sun.
Yeah, and speaking of love and compatibility is always one of the big concerns of people when it comes to signs. Is it true that there are certain signs are more compatible with other signs?
Well, you have to remember we have the whole sky within us, right? So of course, if you are a fire sign, other fire signs, you're going to feel that sense of connection and understanding with them in a different way than you would, for example, a water sign, right? What happens when fire and water get together? They put each other out, right? So what happens when fire and air get together? They're both stimulated, right? Especially, it's like fanning the flames. So if you think about it just on that level, of course, there are some signs that work better with each other. However, again, we have these different parts of ourselves, and I have seen it. I have seen two people whose suns really do not get along at all, or are just not connected at all. But there's lots of other things in those charts that are happening that do connect and that make it a successful relationship.
Yeah, I've always analyzed. I think it's the air aspect of my sign, but I've always looked at, just basic numerology, astrology, Myers-Briggs, everything, that I can play with. And I've noticed that, water signs, I've had challenges with.
Well, sorry, didn't you say earlier you're an Aquarius sun and a fire moon? Like you're a
Yes.
Leo moon?
Yeah.
And what's your rising sign?
Virgo.
Okay, so if you think about it, right, just on one level, that you have a fire moon. So yeah, a water sign could very much feel like they're kind of putting that emotional fire out. And do you know your chart well enough to know, this might be a little, I don't know how, advanced astrology knowledge your audience has, and so this may be a little bit more advanced, but when you get a chart done, now this again, it gets a little bit more advanced here. Well, not really advanced. Let's say a little bit more intermediate. But what tends to happen is that really with astrology, there's a history of connection with astronomy and mathematics. And that really has to do with the degrees. It has to do with exactly where that placement is in the sky for you. And so that tends to be a factor as well. But, I'm also thinking about the fact that given that your rising sign is the sign after your moon, it must be like, the water signs, I think about how that can really feel like they get in your way, or it might feel a little bit like there's some sabotaging happening there, even if it's just you. So some of that may be a theme that arises sometimes as well. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get along with fire signs, with water signs, because remember, your rising sign is Earth. And so you can absolutely meet people who, help you to be in the world in ways that you like, who are water signs. That can be part of some of the initial connection that you may feel with these people. But it's just about considering, especially once it becomes a deeper, more emotional relationship, that is where you want to practice some self-awareness and try to temper some of that energy so that you can find that common ground.
Yeah, it would be fun to get my chart done because I've never done it. So what would you say are some of the benefits for someone if they did get their chart done?
Well, really, it's self-knowledge, right? That's really it. Astrology allows a symbolic look at your life and allows you to contemplate what some of the higher lessons may be that are playing out, what some wisdom is playing out here. So that's part of the opportunity with astrology. And, I just really believe astrology is something that has been resilient. It is a part of every culture, past and present. It is something that continues to survive, continues to thrive, because it does speak to some, deep inner longing, some deep inner need, an understanding that we have, whether or not that's a conscious understanding, but some understanding that we have with our connection to each other and to everyone, and also that desire to understand our lives from a more enlightened, a higher perspective, if you will. And so if you feel it calling you, why not? Why not take the plunge and see? It may take you in some, very interesting directions much better than anything you could have planned for yourself.
Yeah. And do you think a chart would point out potentially patterns that have played out in careers or relationships?
Absolutely. Yeah. It can show us something about where it is that you are in terms of your understanding, your growth, your learning. There are some symbols that speak to, what you're attracted to, what turns you on, your automatic responses, and other symbols that speak to what you really need. And so depending on where you are in your life and your understanding, it can be quite enlightening to realize, like, okay, why do you end up in the same relationships? Why are you turned on by the certain types of people you are? Is it serving what you really need or not? It can actually be quite enlightening. And I think also it's, you sit with somebody and they know you and you don't know them. They know nothing about you other than your date of birth, and they know you. So that can be pretty amazing as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I generally follow, with my basic knowledge, I follow just a few elements of astrology. And then I really love your videos because you take all of the complex info and just kind of summarize it into your weekly forecast and monthly forecast for each sign. So it's been really helpful to me. And I noticed in one of your recent videos, you were talking about the new year for Aquarius on January 27th.
Yes. So what we are going to have is a new moon in the sign of Aquarius. So normally you get one new moon per sign per year. And it's like your own personal new year, if you will, right? So you're getting this one, the Aquarians are getting this new moon. And so it is going to feel like a new year all over again, if you will. And really new moons help you to have an understanding of who you really are and what you really desire to begin. And so they can be very empowering. They allow you to get in touch with some emotional truth within yourself that tells you what you'd like to do, what direction you'd like to go in.
One of the things that I follow is Mercury Retrograde. Having worked in IT, I know that it's very impactful. So can you explain a little bit about what Mercury Retrograde is?
Sure. So Mercury Retrograde is, in some ways it's an optical illusion. It is when from our perspective, we see Mercury traveling backwards in the sky. And what it represents is, if you think about Mercury, right, messenger of the gods, it's communication. It's the modes of communications. It's also commerce as well, things like cash registers and the internet connection even. So these are all means with which we communicate and operate sort of the day in and day outs of our lives. And when we see a planet going backwards, from our perspective, of course, but we see it going backwards, it represents maybe things not moving forward as strong as we may like, but it also represents an area that we'll have to return to, that we'll have to come back to. Because essentially what's happening is that planet is walking back and forth. Will walk 3 times over the exact same part of the sky. So we will in some way have to come back to that idea and then move forward with that idea.
Yeah. And what are some of the do's and don'ts of Mercury retrograde during that period?
So some of the do's and don'ts: don't sign contracts, any kind of legal documents, very important. I would also say, when it comes to new technologies, maybe don't purchase like the latest phone, sort of don't be an early adopter to any kind of new technology during a Mercury retrograde. And I would also say, moving parts, they say things with moving parts, even like cars and things, engines, you want to be a little bit mindful of. That is also connected to Mars, and a lot of the planets do go retro. So that's one thing. But I would say, any kind of large purchases I would really avoid. I've been having this recent Mercury retrograde. Mercury just went direct like a couple days ago. And I've had the most interesting experience over the course of this Mercury retrograde. Now, for me, I like to tap into different archetypes. And for my work in particular, I consider it very Uranian, like very Uranus oriented. So I was looking at Uranus and I was like, okay, I really want to start something new with my work. I want to present something new. Let's do it at this particular date when Uranus is doing something very special. And so what happens? Mercury goes retro and my voice goes away. And this has never happened to me. Never, ever. I've never had this situation before. My voice, poof, gone. It shocked me to see it. And it just halted all of my plans. It halted everything. And, a lot of what I call my friends and fans, like the people who watch me, like I get 500,000 views every month. So lots of people are watching me and a lot of people like to interact with me. And I was getting all kinds of emails and posts on Facebook and everything. And people were saying, don't worry, it's Mercury retrograde. Just wait, just wait. And then after that, I started having all these issues. It was so interesting, the web developer and then the content. And then I finally said, okay, universe, I get it. I get it. You need me to be quiet. No worries. So I did. And, like December is like my busiest month of the whole year. A lot of people, they want that end of year perspective, beginning of the new year perspective. A lot of people order every year. They order right for the end of the year. Gifts. A lot of people order gifts as well, like readings from me, different things from me. So it's the busiest time. So it's like the most inconvenient time that this could happen. And it happened. Well, of course, it makes sense now. Mercury is newly direct and a lot of things are moving forward and a lot of things are starting to make sense as I'm going back over the same ground. And I'm considering things from like a new clarity that just hasn't been there before. And that, I mean, talk about continuing to learn about the sky. It's been absolutely enlightening. And I have been seeing a lot of people online say that, maybe they didn't lose their voice, but in some way or another, they've had to reconsider what their voice is going to be, reconsider what it is that they have to say to the world, to their family, whatever the sphere of their world is. They've in some way had to reconsider that as part of now moving forward with that, having contemplated enough. Now comes the action. So I'm certainly feeling this as well. Today, I was telling you before we started, this is the day I get a lot of media requests. I do interviews quite frequently, all kinds of media. I'm very, very supportive of all kinds of media, every sort of avenue. And so today was sort of my catch-up day, right? And I wanted to see if I could do it. So I've had to take a few coughing breaks to do it, but I have been able to do it. But, it's been absolutely enlightening to me to contemplate how, if I had done these interviews a month ago, how different my message would have been. What I had to say would have been very different than it is now. And so, I just think that that's part of the process. And all of us in some way now are going to start to find a new voice. And it's a great time to do that. New year, new voice, new understandings. It's it's always a good thing.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful example about Mercury retrograde because, despite all the hassles of technology breaking, I really do like that aspect of the review portion and really, being introspective during that time.
For sure. Mercury retrograde can actually be really good. It's good for like redoing things, re-examining, renegotiating, anything with a recycling, whatever. It can be really good. It's also, a lot of writers are born with Mercury retrograde because it allows you to kind of go over your words. It allows you to think about what you really want to say. And it is during a Mercury retrograde that people born with Mercury retrograde can actually, feel that much more clearer. They're able to see some voice within them that much more clearer, but also to find a way to like sort of develop it and express it as well.
Yeah. Well, Nadiya, thank you so much. Before I let you go, do you mind if I ask you just one fun question?
Sure, go for it.
What do you like to do on your day off?
Ooh, what do I like to do on my day off? That's a hard one. I haven't felt like I had a day off in a really long time. And that's not good, because I think that there's, balance. I'm always happier when I have more balance. But I think I'm just a normal person like anybody else. I like to go out for dinners. I like to go to the movies. I like to go to the beach, all of that stuff, just like anybody else. I like to find people that I connect with, that I can, feel a sense of friendship and a sense of family with. And, I like to talk. I gotta say, I like to talk. That made this last month particularly hard, but yeah, I like to share ideas. That's always really fun for me as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much again. I know your book is out on Amazon, again, called Astrology Realized.
Exactly.
Astrology Realized. And if listeners want to contact you, do you give readings, by the way, or?
Well, they can connect with me through my website, nadiyashah.com. Find me online as well. I'm everywhere on YouTube, nadiyashah.com. Yeah, so you can find me online and we can move forward. One thing, my fingers are crossed. I don't know if I should say this. I don't want to jinx it, but I am really hoping that this week in mid-January that that everything is finally ready to launch, to present, that everything comes together. I hope that I have some really exciting new things to announce. So be on the lookout for that as well.
Thank you for listening to WooWoo for the Skeptic. I would love to hear from you about the show, or if you know of someone you would like to see interviewed. And if you enjoyed this episode on astrology, please subscribe in your podcast app so that you never miss an episode. And now for your moment of woo. This quote comes from Harriet Tubman, who said, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world." Have a great week, everyone.